church was full of life that Sunday morning. Choir stood in front, dressed in bright purple robes. Their voices rose like the early morning sun. The drums rolled. Keyboard played softly. People clapped, danced, and lifted their hands high. Among them stood Kamara, the choir mistress, her eyes closed, her arms stretched toward the ceiling. She was not just singing. She was pouring her whole heart into the music. Kamara was 29 years old, tall and beautiful with dark glowing skin. Her voice sounded like warm honey. She wore a long blue gown that touched the ground and moved gently as she turned side to side. Her smile could light up a sad heart. People often said she was an angel sent to earth. Children in the church loved her. Young girls followed her everywhere. Mothers admired her. Pastor always used her as an example for others. She was a youth leader, a worship leader, and a prayer warrior. She knew all the Bible verses and could quote them without looking. But there was something no one saw. Behind her smile was a tired heart. Behind her singing was a silent cry. Behind her worship was a question that refused to go away. Lord, where is my husband? At night, Kamara would lie on her bed, looking at the ceiling. Her phone would be beside her, silent. Everyone else had someone. Her best friend, Beezy, had 3 kids. Another sister in church had just gotten engaged. Even the shy usher girl had a boyfriend. Kamara had no one. She prayed. She fasted. She sowed seeds, tended every vigil, joined every mountain prayer. But still nothing. She wasn't proud. She was not lazy. She didn't even ask for a rich man. All she wanted was a good man. A man that loved God. A man that would hold her hand during altar calls. A man that would worship with her, laugh with her, and cry with her. But all the men coming were the opposite. One evening, after choir rehearsal, Sister Funk pulled her aside. Kamara, there's someone I want you to meet, she said with a big smile. Kamara's heart jumped. Is he a believer? Well, not yet, Funk said slowly. But he's a good man. He owns 2 shops in Ikeja. He's very respectful. He even said he's ready to join church because of you. Kamara smiled, but deep down her heart dropped. This was not the first time. Another sister once brought a soldier. He didn't even know how to say grace before eating. A brother from the neighborhood used to smoke but said he had changed. When Kamara checked his Facebook page, he was still posting nightclub videos. Kamara kept turning them all away. And with every rejection, her heart grew heavier. Then one morning, she felt something strange in her stomach. A sharp pain, like a tight knot pulling from inside. She thought it was stress. But the next day, the pain came again, stronger. She bent over while sweeping. That evening, she decided to visit the hospital. The hospital smelled of bleach and silence. The doctor was a kind woman with soft eyes and a gentle voice. She asked questions, ran tests, and checked Kamara's body. After an hour, she returned with the result in her hand. Kamara, she said softly. You have something called POS, polycystic ovary syndrome. Kamara blinked. What does that mean? It means your hormones are not balanced. Can affect your periods. It may also make it harder to get pregnant. Kamara's throat dried up. The doctor continued, You're 29 now. I'll be honest. If you want to have children, you should consider doing so before 30. Your chances may reduce after that. Everything froze. Kamara stared at the wall behind the doctor. She didn't hear the rest of what she was saying. She only heard a loud voice in her head saying, You are running out of time. Kamara left the hospital like someone walking in a dream. The world looked blurry. Her ears rang. She got into a kiki and didn't even greet the rider. When she reached her flat, she sat on the floor. Not the chair. Not the bed. Cold, hard floor. And she cried. She cried until her chest hurt. She cried until her eyes were dry. She cried until her phone rang. It was Femi. Femi had been asking her out for 3 months. He was tall, with a smooth beard and strong arms. He worked in a real estate company and always wore expensive perfume. He had a loud laugh, a fast tongue, and he was not born again. Kamara had told him no many times. "You're not a Christian," she had said. "I can become one," he always replied. "Because of you." Now, as the phone rang, Kamara looked at his name on the screen. She hesitated. Then she picked. "Kamara," Femi's deep voice came through. "I don't know why, but I just felt like calling you. Are you okay?" She didn't answer. "Hello?" "I went to the hospital," she whispered. Femi was silent. She told him everything. The pain. The test. The doctor's words. Her fear. Her age. When she finished, there was silence. Then Femi said, "I'm coming to see you tomorrow." The next morning, there was a knock at her door. Kamara opened it. Femi stood there with a bouquet of red flowers in one hand and a bag full of food, fruits, drinks, and gifts in the other. He didn't speak. He just walked in, dropped the things on the table, and hugged her. Kamara stood there, frozen. It had been so long since someone held her like that. Femi stayed for 2 hours. They talked. They laughed. He wiped her tears and even prayed with her, though his words were short and unsure. Then, just as he stood to leave, he turned and said, "Kamara, marry me." She blinked. "What?" "I'm serious," Femi said. "You need a husband. I need a wife. Let's help each other. We'll figure the rest out along the way." Kamara's heart beat fast. Everything inside her screamed no. But something else whispered yes. Pain was fresh. The fear was deep. Clock was ticking. She was almost 30. And the only man who seemed to care was Femi. She didn't answer that night. But 2 weeks later, she said yes. And that was how the door opened. Not the door of joy. Not the door of peace. But the door of compromise. The wedding happened in just 6 weeks. No long planning. No counseling. No real prayers. Just speed. Kamara wore a white dress with silver stones that sparkled under the church lights. The hall was filled with fake smiles, short speeches, and a pastor who kept glancing at his watch. People clapped. People danced. Femi looked handsome in a sky-blue agbada. He whispered sweet words into her ears and held her hand tightly. But inside Kamara's heart was a small storm. Quiet unease she couldn't name. As she looked into Femi's eyes that day, something inside her whispered, "Are you sure?" But it was too late to turn back. The first 2 weeks of marriage felt like a warm bath. Femi made her laugh. He cooked for her. Came home with small gifts. They watched movies and held hands. He even came to church twice and smiled through the whole service. Kamara started believing maybe things would be fine. She dropped her fears. She gave him her heart. She gave him her body. She even stopped leading the choir for a while just to focus on her new home. But slowly, very slowly, things started to shift. Began with small comments. "Must you always pray so loud? Why do you wear these long skirts like an old woman? Babe, relax, it's not every night we must read Bible." Then one day, he rolled his eyes during their morning prayer. Another day, he left the house before church started. Then he stopped attending completely. "Pastor again," he would mutter. "Don't you get tired?" Kamara smiled at first. She thought he just needed time. She started praying harder, fasting again, trying to bring back the man who once brought her flowers. But Femi didn't return. One Friday evening, Femi came home late. Very late. Kamara was in the kitchen preparing okra soup. Clock said 11:17 p.m. She had called him 3 times but got no reply. When the door finally opened, He walked in smelling of perfume that wasn't his own. Kamara stood still, holding the spoon. He didn't greet her. He walked straight to the fridge, took a bottle of water, drank it, and walked past her. "Femi," she called softly. He stopped. She swallowed. "You didn't pick my calls." "I was busy," he said coldly. "With what?" she asked, her voice shaking. He turned to her, eyes hard. "Why do you always ask questions like you're my mother?" And that was the first slap. It didn't land on her face. It landed in her heart. After that night, everything became worse. Femi stayed out late often. Sometimes he didn't come home at all. When Kamara asked, he said she was being too holy and too paranoid. He started laughing at her worship songs. He mocked her speaking in tongues. When she played gospel music in the house, he would switch it off and turn on loud Afrobeats. Kamara stopped leading choir completely. She couldn't pray the way she used to. She couldn't even think clearly. She would lie on the bed and just stare at the ceiling, sometimes for hours. Then one Saturday afternoon it happened. Kamara was sweeping the living room when she heard laughter outside the door. She opened it. And there was Femi with a lady. Light-skinned. Red lipstick. Tight dress. They were laughing, holding takeout packs, and sharing a joke like lovers. Kamara just stared. Femi looked at her, smiled, and said, "Oh babe, meet Tonia, she's my business partner." Then he walked past her with Tonia still laughing. They entered the house. Sat on her sofa. Watched her television. Kamara stood by the door like a ghost. From that day, Femi stopped pretending. He brought women home often. Sometimes 2 in 1 week. They wore short dresses, smoked, drank wine, and used her perfumes. One of them even used Kamara's scarf to tie her hair before sleeping on her pillow. Kamara complained once. Just once. Femi looked her in the eye and said, "Leave if you don't like it." "Who begged you to stay?" She went to the bathroom that night and sat inside the bathtub, fully clothed. She wept until her mouth stopped moving. Then she stood up. Then the cabinet. And for the first time in her life, she opened a bottle of alcohol. First it was small sips. Then full glasses. Then whole bottles. She stopped praying completely. Stopped going to church. Stopped wearing long skirts. She started wearing tight dresses and fake lashes. The same Kamara who once led prayers was now being led by pain. She began shouting at people on the street. She blocked her pastor's number. She deleted gospel songs from her phone. She changed. Not because she wanted to, but because her heart had been shattered in quiet pieces. On her 30th birthday, Kamara woke up with a hangover. There was no cake. No gift. No happy birthday. Femi was not home. She sat by the window, hugging her knees, staring at the dusty sun outside. Her womb was still empty. Her soul felt dry. She had traded her oil for ashes. She whispered, "God, are you still there?" No answer. Just silence. Later that week, she stepped out to buy bread. She hadn't even brushed. She wore a faded wrapper and oversized slippers. As she walked past a quiet street, she heard someone call her name. Kamara. She turned. It was Pastor Joseph. He looked shocked. "Is this you?" Kamara opened her mouth but said nothing. Tears filled her eyes. He walked closer. "Please, come to my office tomorrow." "I can't," she whispered. "You must." The next day, she sat in the pastor's office like a lost child. He said no long prayers. No shouting. No judgment. He simply asked, "Kamara, how did we get here?" And she broke. She wept. She shook. She knelt on the floor and poured out everything. The wedding. The slap. The women. The alcohol. The pain. The shame. Everything. Pastor Joseph placed his hand on her head and whispered a prayer that sounded like a father's song. "Daughter, come home." And that day, Kamara came home. But her heart was still bleeding. Her womb was still waiting. And the journey back had only just begun. She stepped into church barefoot. Her shoes were still in her bag. Her face was bare, no makeup, no lashes. Her heart pounded like a drum. The moment she entered, the choir was singing, "You are the strength of my life." I lift my hands in total praise. Kamara froze at the door. Something broke inside her. Not pain this time. Not guilt. But a warmth she hadn't felt in years. Like a gentle wind. Like a father's hand on her shoulder. The ushers tried to lead her to a seat, but she shook her head. She went straight to the altar and knelt down. Her tears fell like rain. And this time they weren't tears of shame. They were tears of returning. Kamara came back to church. Not just the building. She came back to the God who never left. Pastor Joseph welcomed her with open arms. The church didn't ask questions. Choir waited with silent smiles. Nobody judged. Nobody whispered. They just loved her back to life. It was not easy. Her house was still filled with pain. Femi was still Femi. But Kamara had changed. She didn't shout anymore. She didn't cry at night. She sang again. Not on stage yet, just in her room. Quiet songs. Healing songs. Songs with no music, just tears and whispers. She started praying again. But not for a husband. Not for a child. But for peace. And peace came. Not all at once. But in small pieces like morning dew. One night, Femi came home drunk and dropped his car keys loudly. Kamara didn't speak. She stood, took her Bible, and entered the room. The next morning, she packed her things and moved out. Not in anger. Not in fear. But in freedom. No court drama. No police case. Just a quiet exit. She moved into a small one-bedroom flat near the church. Clean, peaceful, and full of light. She was finally alone. But for the first time, she wasn't lonely. Kamara started serving again. She didn't rush back to choir mistress. She cleaned the church floor. She arranged the chairs. She sang softly in the back row. People began to notice her glow. It wasn't makeup. It wasn't clothes. It was light. The kind that only comes after fire. On the day she turned 35, the sky was quiet. She woke up early and knelt by her bed. There was no birthday cake. No flowers. But there was calm in her soul. She whispered, "Thank you." And that was enough. Later that evening, the youth church held a worship hangout. The hall was full of candles and soft music. Young people danced barefoot, lifted their hands, and cried softly in the corner. Kamara stood by the wall, watching with peace in her eyes. And then, a man walked up to her. He wasn't loud. He wasn't flashy. He wore a plain white shirt and black jeans. He had kind eyes. Quiet strength. A Bible in his hand. "Hi," he said. "You're Kamara, right?" She nodded. "My name is Alicia. I heard you sing once during a morning devotion. I just wanted to say thank you." Kamara smiled. "You're welcome." They stood there for a few seconds. No pressure. No pickup lines. Just stillness. He asked if she liked books. She said yes. He asked if she liked walks. She said yes again. He didn't ask for her number. He gave her his. And walked away. She waited 3 days before texting. "Hi. This is Kamara." He replied after 5 minutes. "Hi. I was praying you would message." And that's how it began. No rushing. No pressure. Just long talks about God, forgiveness, second chances, music, life. They didn't meet often. sometimes once a week, sometimes not at all. But whenever they met, it was full of light. Alicia never asked her about Femi, never asked her about her past. He treated her like gold, like she was still holy, still worthy, still whole. 3 months later, they attended a youth seminar together. The theme was healing after the storm. Kamara sat in the second row, eyes closed, hands lifted. Alicia sat beside her, praying softly. After the final worship, as people stood to leave, he turned to her. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Right there in that holy silence, he knelt down. No crowd, no shouting, just a whisper. Kamara, will you walk this new journey with me? Kamara covered her mouth. Tears rushed to her eyes. Not tears of fear, not tears of doubt, but the kind of tears that come when beauty finally finds you after pain. She nodded slowly. And that was enough. The wedding was simple. Small hall, white and green decor, gentle music. No loud agbada, no fake smiles. Just joy, real joy. She wore a white lace gown with no heavy makeup. Alicia wore a simple black suit. They worshipped before they kissed. They prayed before they danced. People wept. Because this time it was real. 9 months later, Kamara gave birth. Not to one, not to two, but to triplets. 3 beautiful babies with wide eyes and strong lungs. 2 girls and 1 boy. Their names? Zara, Mercy, Emmanuel. Zara because light returned. Mercy because God didn't give her what she deserved, He gave her what she needed. Emmanuel because God was with her even when she thought He was gone. Now when Kamara sings, people cry, because there's oil in her voice, pain behind her praise, and beauty in her brokenness. She doesn't preach. She doesn't teach. She just sings. And her song says, "Even when I was lost, He never left me." If you have not subscribed to my channel, you might not hear my voice again, but if you are, then you are growing every day. Check my page for more interesting stories. Thanks for watching.